What's going on, everybody? Jesse here. Welcome back to another episode in our inventory system. In today's episode, we are going to wrap up the primary functionality of our inventory drag and drop system. So by the end of today's episode, what you should be able to drag items, drop it anywhere within the inventory that you want, drop the similar items so they combine to one another, and then just swap out identical items. By the end of the episode, this is what you have. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Today's episode and others just like it are brought to you by my patrons, such as those that you see on the screen right now. If you'd like to support the channel and future development, then consider becoming a patron by visiting my Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee page, where you can receive various benefits, such as early access to my videos, as well as personalized support. You may also want to consider joining the community in my Discord server, where you can receive help from me as well as the community. So come on over and be a part of the conversation. All right, so I just wanted to start out here in the WBP inventory slot, just to kind of remind you guys where we're at. If you're not familiar with what we did in the last episode, then go ahead and check that out now. Card should be in the description. Otherwise, we're here in the native on-drop call that we have here. We're just overriding the on-drop call, and we're clearing the brushes. We're going to just leave this function as it is. Remember, I said in the last episode that what this does is inside this widget, when we drop an item, it calls this function first inside the widget. We're having it clear the brushes here. Down here, we're having it run this little event to clear the brushes, so that way it removes the little blue border that we have, all the styling we have on each cell when we drop it, and then it's passing true. So this will, once this returns true, this is going to return the operation. Now the operations you can see there is the drag and drop operation that we created in the slot drag operation, and we're just going to run through there. But what I wanted to show you guys here and remind you about is in here, you could put all your on drop functionality in here. That's perfectly acceptable. It'll work, but you know, try to keep things centralized to where it really kind of belongs. And in here, if you want to have any sort of checks that will determine whether the on drop was successful or not, enter that in here. And then you could pass true or false depending on whatever checks that you want to run. All right, but I'm just going to have, I don't have any checks in here, at least for right now. So I just want it to always pass true after the clear drag brush. So once we have that complete, head over to the WBP slot drag operation. And in here, if you come down here to the override functions, it's not here now because we already have it out, but select event drop, and then you're going to get this little event right here. And this is where we're going to start building our functionality. We're just going to run a couple checks here. So let's grab the under drag slot, pull that out, and let's get that. And from here, let's go ahead and check is valid. We want the function, not the macro. And I'm going to pull off the check here and go not. Is this not valid? Or grab the payload, so right click, let's type payload. Now remember, the payload is what we passed in when we started the drag detection. Payload is the actual slot that we're dragging around that's attached to the cursor. So let's grab that and let's double check, go equal. So what is this equal to? Let's I'm just gonna plug that in right here. Let's make sure it's not equal to the under drag slot. So make sure that the payload that we're dragging around isn't what's currently under this. So in other words, we're not trying to actually drop on the same slot. So if we are dragging on the same slot, so plug that into the or. So what we're checking here, are we not valid or are these the same? So let's drop in a branch. And if they are, if either of these conditions are true, we don't want to do anything. We're just going to leave that blank. Okay, so you could have done this a little bit backwards and check the other way, but we're just going to run off the false here because I think this is a little bit more clear to understand. Not valid or the payload and the under drag are the same. So if that's false, then what we're going to do, we're going to actually run a custom function in here. So let's head over to the AC inventory component. Let's create that function. And for now, I'm just going to create the function name. And so let's just hit a plus up here, and we're going to call this one on drop. So you can name this whatever you want. I'm doing this just kind of for clarity, but we've got so many on drops going on that I can see that this could be confusing. So name it whatever you want. But for me, I understand what's going on here. So I'm going to name mine on drop, and we want 2 inputs here. So the first input, let's call this one under drag slot. And we're going to put this as an item. So we want this to be the inventory item. So select that, and then we're going to add another input here, and let's name this one drag slot. You can probably name this one payload if you want, just to kind of keep with it. I'm going to name drag slot though, and we're going to keep that the same as well. All right, so that's all we're going to enter for this right now. So let's go ahead and compile it and save it so we have access to it. And let's head back over to the slot drag operations. We'll go back, we'll set up the functionality for that on drop in just a minute. So drag off the false here. And actually, let's go ahead and grab the under drag slot again. Drag out here, we want the item. So get item. And then from the item, drag off, and let's go ahead and break this. So now what we want from here, now we can drag off of the owning inventory, and let's go on drop. This is the function that we just created. And I'm going to hide the connected pins and just kind of organize this a little bit. Drag off the false, and let's hook that up to the on drop function. So now we need to pass in 2 items here, the under drag slot. So we've got the item here that we just broke. So let's just go ahead and take that, and let's plug that into the function right there. And then the other one will be from the payload. So let's come back here to the payload, and I'm just going to jump in a reroute node. We're going to actually cast this to our WBP inventory slot. And I'm going to make this, I'm going to right click this, and let's go ahead and convert this to a pure cast. Now, as long as you're passing in payload, this should always be successful. So as long as you know back in your on drag detect that you have this set up, then you shouldn't have any issues with this. This should always have, this should always succeed. So that's why when you're confident it's going to always succeed, you don't have to run the execution pins. You can just run it as a pure node. So with that, let's drag off of here. You could do this if you don't want to do a cast. You can go ahead and set up an interface call, but I'm not too concerned about this with this particular setup that we have going on here. So get item, and then the item, we're going to plug it into the drag slot right there. So that's all we need to do from this particular function, at least for now. So let's go ahead and head over to the AC inventory component. All right, so one thing to remember here real quick, even though we're in our AC inventory component, remember this on drop is actually being called, let's head back here real quick. We're actually calling this on the under drag slot. Now this is important to remember where we're calling this from, as you'll see moving forward. But just remember, you could do this from the payload, from the one being dragged around. If you really want to, you can come out here and break this and get the owning inventory off of that. Doesn't really matter which one you use, just remember which one we're doing it, and because we're dropping onto the item, I figured we would go ahead and focus on the under drag slot. So if we come back over here now to the AC inventory component, this on drop functionality or function is going to be the primary function that is going to handle all our drop functions for each slot widget. So really there's only 2 basic checks that we're gonna, one main check that we're gonna do on this. And let's go ahead and throw out a branch here. And what we need to check for, let's drag off of the under drag slot, and let's break this. And then drag off of the drag slot, and we're gonna break this one as well. So really what we need to do, this only real major check that we need to do here is we need to drag off the item and do an equal. We need to see, are these 2 items similar? Do they have the same class type? What this is going to indicate to us, if it is, then what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to combine the slots together. And if they're not, then we're just doing a plain swap, one slot for the other. We're going to put one item into the where we're dropping it at, and the item that was in that original slot, drop it back into the other slot. So it'll make a little bit of sense here in a second, but I'm going to select these, hide unconnected pins, and then from here, plug that into our condition of the branch and plug this in. So are these the same? Let's go ahead and run off of the true. And if they are the same, then what we need to do is we just need to run the add. So we're in the AC component. So let's go add item. And now remember, this isn't the utility add items. This wants to add into an array. We want our function that we created, add item, set that in there, and let's plug it into the true. So now again, remember I just said that we're running this on the under drag. So we're going to leave this as self because this is the item that we're dropping onto. We're going to run this functionality on the item on the slot that we're dropping to. Okay, so we want to add the new item. So the item we want to add will actually be the drag slot. So go ahead and just type drag slot, and that's going to get this variable right here. We're going to take this, we're just going to plug this straight into the item. So that's the item that we want to add. So where do we want it? We need an index right here. So let's go ahead and grab the under drag slot and break this one. And you can run off of here if you want to, but I'm just going to grab a new one, grab the index location. So again, we're running this add item on the under drag slot. Okay, this is where we're running it to. The item we want to add is the one that we're actually dragging around, the payload, the one attached to the cursor. We want to drop the one that we're dropping from the cursor onto the under drag slot, which is this location. So we're calling it on the under drag in the location of which one is ever set here. Okay, so once we got that all set up, let's head over to another branch. We're going to punch another branch in here. So now remember, in our add item here, it's going to return any items that were over. So since we're dragging here onto a similar item, remember this is equal to, we're running off the tree here. So we're dragging, let's say, red berries onto more red berries. So this add item runs through and it double checks, hey, is the quantity amount equal to the max quantity amount? And if there's any remaining items, then it's going to return it to us here. So let's pull off of this. This is just the returning value, if anything. Remember, this quantity amount could equal 0. So what we're going to do is we're just going to check, is it greater than 0? All right, so if that means we had returning items from here. So greater than 0, plug that into the branch right here. So if it is greater than 0, then that means we have some leftover stuff and we just need to handle that. So off of the true here, let's go ahead and go remove item. You can set up other functionalities to be able to swap these items around if you want to, but I'm going to find it easier in this current setup. I found it easier. We're just going to remove the item from the original slot. So if I go to the drag slot, Control D, we want to remove the drag slot. Now it's going to take this in here. Again, this is the one being dragged around. So we're going to remove the item from that. And we need to also call it on the drag slot. So let's break this out. Grab the owning inventory, plug that into the target. And then so now this item will be removed from the inventory. Okay, one thing we need to do though, I did make a mistake. Let's head over to the remove item in the inventory component. Head over here. We need to make sure when we remove the item, we need to set the owning inventory. So I'm just going to type a reference to self, plug that in there. There we go. Now it's all set up. Head back over to the on drop function now. So now that we've removed the item that was being dragged around from the original slot where we started the drag at, we removed that item. Now we need to add the item back. So let's go add item. Okay. And again, we need to call this on this inventory where we just removed it from, because we're going to be adding this back into it. So I'm going to drag off of here, off of this add item. This is what we had remaining. And I'm just going to plug it into the add right there. Hopefully this is making a little bit sense to you guys. I'm going to open this back up and let's go ahead and add the index location pin And I'm going to move this up a little bit, take the index location, and now we want to plug that in right there. So essentially what we're doing is we're just removing the original item, and then we're just going to reset this with whatever remainder was over. Now this is only happening if it's greater than 0. If not, then we're going to handle that functionality here. If this is not greater than 0, we're just going to handle it right there. All right. So now that we have that, we need to just call the update function. So right click, update inventory HUD. We're going to need to actually call this twice. So Control D, drop it in here twice, because this first one, remember, we're dealing with 2 inventories here. So this first one, we're going to just be as self. So this is going to be the under drag slot. And then we're going to plug this one in, drag this all the way over and plug that into the target. Got to remember to do both, because if you're working with 2 separate inventories, if you're doing a storage unit and your personal inventory, you want both of them to update at the same time. Now, this could be the exact same inventory if you're moving stuff just between the player inventory, which we're going to do in our first example here when we're done. Then you want, it'll run this update twice on there. Not a big deal if it happens. All right, so now what if we don't have anything remaining? Well, that means that we successfully were able to drop our item into the slot and we didn't have anything left over. So all we have to do now is just go remove item. Make sure when you're doing these that you're doing our function call that we created, not running the array one, and type that into false. Well, the item that we need to remove is the drag slot. Let's go ahead and grab that. And let's break this. We need the owning inventory. So we're going to call that one and hide the connected pins. And the item we're going to remove is that one. All right. So then after that, let's go ahead and drop in the update inventories just like we did. Plug that in. And again, we're going to have to update the one under and the one that we're dragging. So plug that in here, and that should be good to go. So now we can jump back out into our editor and play this. We should be able to drop an item onto itself and have it add properly. So let's go check that out. So if I head over here, and on the right side, we've got our berries. So if I press E, let's press it a few times, open it up here. Now we've got 4 berries in this slot. We've got 2 berries in this. So if I right click to drag this item, we can drag it out here. It's not going to do anything yet because we didn't set that up yet, but we did make it to where we could drag here. So now we got 4, we got 2. I drop it on here. This is 4, this is 2. If I take the 2 and try to drop it on the 4, it's essentially, it's going to remove all the items. You can't see it. It happens in a single tick, but it's swapping them around. So there we go. So far, this function seems to hold up here. So if we come over here and we press this a couple times and we get this, we can drag the bread as well. We try to drag this on top of the bread. It's not going to do anything yet. So let's go set this functionality up now so we can drag and move it and swap the items around and move them within our inventory. All right, so back here in the on drop of our inventory component. Now, because of the way we set up the inventory to begin with, remember every index within our item array right here has something in it, whether it's an actual item that you can see and that you can drag and drop around and use or not. Even if it's just the base item, it's still something tangible. It's still an object being held within that array. So essentially all we have to do, it doesn't matter what is going to be in the inventory slot that we're dropping to, right? Because there's something there. So all we have to do is swap them around. It doesn't matter. We're checking here. Are they equal? If they are, we're handling that. But if they're not the same, we just want to switch them around. So we need to just keep that as simple as possible and just keep that in mind as we get through this. So let's go ahead and head down here to the false. So grab the underdog slot. So I'm just going to grab this and I'm going to copy this over here. And for this, I'm going to open this up and we need, and actually I think that should do it for here. So let's go ahead and grab our item array. And with this one, we want to get a reference because we want to manipulate this, this item that we're pulling out. We want to be able to do it. We're setting the members in here. So grab the index off of that. We're getting that. So now from here, we want to set members in F inventory. Now take this and plug this into the false branch there. Give us a little bit of space here. So what do we need to change in here? Select the node, and everything that we want to change we can make available here. So we want to change the quantity and we want to change the item. So these are the 2 pins that we want to change in here. Don't select things you don't want to switch. Anything that's here not checked will remain the same. So the owning inventory is going to remain the same, and its index location is going to remain the same. All we need to do is just swap the item around and the quantity around if a quantity exists. Okay, so since we're getting the under dragged slot, so what we need to do now is we need to swap it for the actual drag slot, the payload as it were. So get the drag slot from here. Let's go ahead and break this one. And the reason why we're not setting the inventory here on this one, because remember, we're setting the under drag slot. So this is the one we're being called. So we don't need to set the owning inventory, because we want this to keep the same owning inventory. Okay, because this is the slot we're dragging to. So from here, grab the quantity, plug that in, grab the item, plug that one in, and that should do it for that one. So set that up all nice and neat. And now we need to take the under slot drag. We need to break this one out. Okay, so now we got this one. So now we just pretty much just need to run the opposite of what we have there. So if we get our drag slot, I'm just gonna grab both of these and copy them over here. So now if we grab this one and get the owning inventory, from here, we want to get the item array, and we want to get a reference to this index. Well, which index do we need? We just need to grab the index location off of this, and we actually don't need the quantity or the item on this particular node. So now that we've got this, we need to set members, and just like we did with the last one, we need the item and the quantity. So now from the under drag, we take that, we plug that into the item, and the quantity, for some reason I didn't click, and that should actually be it. Again, we don't need to change the owning inventory, the owning actor, because or the owning inventory, because we already know that from there. It already has that. And then all we need to do from here, just like we did with these other ones, is we need to update the HUDs. So plug that in. This first one will leave the same. The second one, just so it visually looks okay, I'm just going to grab this, plug that into the update inventory there, and that should be it. We should now be able to just drag and drop it around. So let's go ahead and head on out to the editor and see what this looks like. All right, so now if we go out here and we just grab a few items around here, and now we fill up our inventory. So if we right click and drag one, there we go. Everything moves around as we would expect. If I take this, drag it on top of the berry, it switches those around just like that. Everything seems to be working properly. We drag it off and it doesn't do anything. This is actually canceling the drag operation when we drag it like this. This is how we'll handle dropping an item and spawning it into the world a little bit later. But everything seems to work perfectly. So now when we have a second inventory set up here, when we do the storage unit, then this should all just work seamlessly. So we'll show that as we move forward, but everything works like it should. Let's escape out, make sure we won't get any errors. There we go, no errors. All right, so that's pretty much it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Hopefully I didn't make it too confusing for you as we went through. It's really not that complicated, but it can get a little bit confusing. It's the key is to remember where you're at, because we're calling, you know, even though we're in one class here, the inventory component, there's multiple owners of that component. So same thing with the slots, even though it's one slot class, there's multiple slots classes that are out there. So you just have to remember where you're at and try to be consistent with what you're doing. So, you know, you just remember that this function, the custom on drop that we created for our inventory component, is being called on the under drag slot. So you know that, and then you just work accordingly, right? So, and then know that when you need to do something on the drag slot, that you need to get its owning inventory and plug it into whatever it is you need to run. So whether it's the update inventory HUD or getting its variables. that's pretty much it. Just, you know, it's not too bad. If you guys have any questions, jump on over to the Discord. I'll do what I can to help you guys out. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please do me a favor, go down and hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, think about subscribing while you're down there. Hit that notification bell. That way you're notified anytime we get a new video sent out. And Happy New Year. I hope everybody had a great holiday season. And until the next episode, peace.